Hello and good morning. My name is Edward James. I'm the Director of Content Analysis at MEED Projects. And over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll be giving you all an overview of the water projects market in the MENA region, looking at some of the key trends and providing some in-depth analysis on what's happening in the market. Before I start, I just wanted to explain where the data in this presentation is coming from, because it is quite a data-intensive presentation. It's coming from two sources. First, one of the first sources is the Middle East Water 2021 Projects Report by MEED. This is a comprehensive 400-page plus overview of the water projects market in the region. If you want to find more, then please visit meed.com to get more information about it. The projects data on this presentation itself is from MEED Projects, our projects tracking service. We're covering more than 15,000 live projects currently in the region. If you want to know more about finding business opportunities and projects in the region, then please visit our website, meedprojects.com. Right, without further ado, let's move on to look at some of the supply and demand figures for the water sector in the region. Now, here we're looking at some key facts and figures for water in the GCC. As you can see, at the end of 2018, there were close to 5 million imperial gallons a day water demand in the GCC. Obviously, that number has grown since then. And that figure is slightly higher than total desalination capacity. So obviously, a lot of the difference is made up from groundwater sources. But nonetheless, you can see how with ground sources dwindling, then there's a very substantial urgency for greater desalination capacity. And indeed, if we look at the 2025 figure, water demand is expected to grow to 7.9 million imperial gallons a day. So a very substantial increase in demand for potable water. And that is really at the heart of the very strong investments that we are seeing currently and going forward in the region. Some other key facts and figures around water market in the region: $15 billion a year of average water subsidies required in the region. I'll talk about the actual project data in a sec in some following slides. But we can see that water demand overall in the last 10 years or so has grown on average by about 67% between 2011 and 17. And demand in the region is considerably higher than other parts of the world. It outstrips the world average for water by 65%. So water is really a critical issue at the heart of policy and the heart of project decision making in the region, and indeed has been one of the real success stories for projects market growth over the last decade or two in the region. Now, obviously, we've seen some of those facts and figures. What else is really behind them driving that growth? Well, naturally, the very strong economic and demographic growth we've seen over the last two decades in the region is clearly one of the principal drivers for greater demand for water. Obviously, larger population requires more potable water, but also economic growth, the growth of water requirements for industry, that's also resulted in increasing demand. So clearly, those two issues, those two factors, which are ongoing and will continue for the foreseeable future, are one of the principal reasons for the growth in the water market. What we've also seen in terms of developments and trends is the growth of the RO, reverse osmosis desalination market. Until fairly recently, most desalination plants were plugged into power plants on an IWPP basis. But now more and more, with RO being less energy intensive than thermal desalination technologies like MSF or MED, we are also seeing the uncoupling of the power element from the desalination element, and increasingly we are seeing standalone desalination facilities using RO technology. At the same time, we've also seen a major policy focus on lower unaccounted for water rates and greater water reuse provision. So we've seen billions of dollars invested over the last few years in water treatment facilities, in wastewater treatment, and the extension of networks of the water reuse networks to industrial end users and other end users such as agricultural or beautification purposes. And that's been also in the last 2 decades, that's been a kind of a new sector that's come up in the last 10, 20 years. Also, we mustn't forget the oil and gas sector. As oil and gas fields age, water cut rates, or the amount of water produced with each barrel of oil has increased, and national oil companies have had to find a way of treating this effluent water before disposing of it. And so there's been an industry growing up around the treatment of effluent water from oil production. As I mentioned, there's also been a policy focus on reducing unaccounted for water rates. Water rates, again, until relatively recently, were very high in the region, more than 40, even 50%. And clearly, this is not a very cost-effective situation to have, and therefore governments have prioritized the modernization and repair of networks to ensure lower UFW rates. So those are some of the key drivers behind the projects market, the growth in the projects market for water in the region. Now let's quantify, using the data from MEED projects, let's quantify exactly how the projects market has performed in the water sector over the last decade or so. So since 2010, in the MENA region, we've seen more than $93 billion worth of contracts awarded. And you can see here that 2015 was the peak year with a little over $12.1 billion. And indeed, last year in 2020, $9.2 billion. And in fact, the fact that water sector didn't decline like other sectors did in 2020 and amid the global pandemic it just underlines just how strategically important the water sector is. And you can see that every year there are approximately 100 water projects of more than $10 million awarded. Now, in terms of the value of the projects awarded by country over the last decade, you can see here that Saudi Arabia, with close to $30 billion worth of contracts awarded, is by far and away the largest projects market for the water sector in the region. It's followed then by UAE at about $15 billion in the last decade, Qatar, a little under that, then Oman, Kuwait, Egypt, Iraq, and so on. But you can see that Saudi Arabia is by far and away the largest market. That's obviously to do with the fact that it's geographically very vast and also has one of the larger populations in the Arab world. So when you combine that along with its very considerable industrial sector, then you can see why it leads the way in terms of expenditure on water. Then in terms of the same data, but looking at it by segment, in the water market, you can see that the transmission or the distribution of water pipeline projects are the largest single segment for the last decade at more than $25 billion. We then have water desalination at about $22 billion, and then water treatment about $20 billion. And then again, if you look at it in a slightly different way, we can see that the transmission of water comprises about a little over a third of all projects, followed by desalination and treatment. What are some of the top projects currently under execution in the market today? Here's just to give you an idea of what they are. As you can see, across different countries, across different types of projects. You can see Al Hayman, the PPP project in Kuwait, is the largest single project currently under execution, worth about $1.4 billion. That was awarded in the last 12 months. We then have a more recent project, which is the utilities infrastructure contract for the Red Sea tourism project, worth $900 million again on a PPP basis. That's also something that's well underway now, as is the Ambu 4 IWP and the Tawila IWP, that rounding off the top four. Now, again, I think what's interesting amongst this list is that the majority of these projects are all being implemented with the private sector. Like power, it has become the norm for treatment and desalination projects to be executed on a PPP basis, using the private sector to finance, build and operate the plant. And increasingly, we're now seeing the private sector asked to also build and operate pipelines. This is a trend emerging out of Saudi Arabia with the SWPC and its independent water transmission pipeline program. But by and large, now the vast majority of projects are being done with the private sector. In terms of the top contractors, well, here we are. We've got a list of the top 20 major local and international contractors working on water projects in the region. You see SEPCO 3 here. The Chinese is ranked number 1. Then we have Arashi Trading Contracting out of Saudi Arabia, number 2. WT Western Technic, which is working on the Hayman wastewater treatment plant in Kuwait, number 3. SSEM out of Saudi Arabia, and 4, and so on. You can see here this list. We've got international companies from around the world. We've also got local companies active in the market, which just goes to show that the market is open for everyone, regardless of where you're coming from. And it's one of these reasons. It's for this reason, as well as the stability of the market and the future growth projections, that has made it so popular for many companies to participate in the region. In terms of the top clients, well, SWCC, the region's largest desalinator, world's largest desalinator, is number 1. Obviously, it's the client behind most of the big desalination facilities and transmission pipelines in Saudi Arabia. We then got Saudi Arabia Ministry of Municipal and Rural Affairs for smaller scale municipal treatment facilities in Saudi. QEWC, which is developing a number of large IWPPs and IPPs in Qatar. Then Ashghal, which is in Qatar on the distribution and transmission side. And then finally, SWPC, rounding off the top 5, is the client for private public-private partnership water projects in Saudi Arabia. You can see here a lot of government utilities, although the private sector finances and develops the projects. Of course, the initial tendering and the oversight of these projects is ultimately done by government or state utilities. Now let's move forward. Let's look at the pipeline of future projects. We have more than $88 billion worth of known future projects in the water sector in the MENA region, again led by Saudi Arabia, close to $30 billion of known projects in the pipeline, then the UAE at close to $20 billion, Iraq at just under 10, and then at Kuwait, Egypt, and so on. The breakdown of this pipeline is fairly similar to the historic pipeline. You can see here split between desalination, treatment, and transmission being the 3 main elements. And of course, that $88 billion compares favorably with the $93 billion awarded in the last decade. We have obviously got visibility only for about 3 to 5 years for future projects. So, on a pro rata basis, you would expect a lot more comparatively than the $93 billion the last decade. And you would expect considerably more to be awarded up to 2030. In terms of projects currently out in the market, so just to crystallize some of those figures, well, recently, just last week, we saw the ADNOC release tenders for the Merthyr seawater treatment plant and Al Nouf seawater treatment plant, again, PPP basis, 2 giant facilities worth more than $2 billion each. EOIs are expected to be submitted by the end of the year. We've then got the long-awaited seawater supply project in Iraq to help with oil and gas output in the country. And we've got utility infrastructure at Amala, one of the Giga projects in Saudi Arabia, again on a private basis, looking to produce power and water for the touristic development. And finally, we've got also another emerging trend is the Independent Strategic Water Reservoir program in Saudi Arabia. Again, for the first time, private sector is coming in to build, own, and operate and finance reservoirs in the region for the first time. Longer term, Well, we've got the long-awaited Dubai strategic sewage tunnels to centralise sewage collection, stormwater collection in Dubai. It looks like these are going to be coming out within the next 12 to 18 months, and it looks like they will be done on a PPP basis using the private sector. Should be very interesting. This is something that everyone has been waiting on for a long time, and the market is very hopeful that these can come out in due course. We've got a range of different projects, as you can see here, across different markets, different types of projects. And again, is something that gives a lot of people optimism for future opportunities going forward. And then finally, in terms of who the biggest clients are going to be in the water market, well, Dubai Municipality, by virtue of this Deira and Dubai strategic sewage tunnels projects, then SWPC, which has a raft of reservoir, pipeline, and sewage treatment facilities all being implemented by the private sector. It's got a long pipeline of projects and is expected to be a major player going forward. As is NWC, National Water Company, which is responsible for treatment and distribution of reused water. It's got hundreds of projects, small and large, across the kingdom as it seeks to extend wastewater treatment provision to the entire population. And as you can see, we have these other normal utility providers, government utilities will of course be tendering typically a large number of projects going forward. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the presentation. I hope it's given you a good context for the discussions to be had next for the rest of the day. As you can see, more than $88 billion worth of future projects, known future projects in the pipeline, and it will keep the market busy for many years to come. Water sector is growing, it's stable, it's got plenty of very substantial and concrete drivers behind it, and for many companies, it's the sector to be in. I hope you found it useful and interesting. I wish you all, hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I just hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you very much. Bye bye.